The dust of the departing wagon settled over Zara Preston's trembling form as she stood alone at Heartbreak Crossing, a desolate junction where the main trail from Austin split toward Pecos, Texas. The year was 1873, and the merciless June sun beat down upon her fair skin as tears streaked clean paths through the dirt on her cheeks. Her family's wagon had disappeared over the eastern horizon, taking with it her last connection to anything familiar in this world. "We can't feed another mouth that won't work," her stepfather had declared that morning, hauling her trunk down from the wagon and dropping it unceremoniously in the dirt. 19 is plenty old enough to make your own way. The next stage comes through in a week. Perhaps you'll find employment in town. Her mother had wept silently but hadn't contradicted him. With 3 young children from their marriage and another on the way, Zara had become expendable, a reminder of her mother's first husband, who died of cholera 6 years prior. The drought had made everyone desperate, but Zara never imagined they'd abandon her with nothing but a trunk of belongings and the dress on her back. The Crossroads offered no shelter, just a weathered signpost pointing toward distant towns she'd only heard mentioned in passing conversation. No water, no food, and the nearest homestead miles away. As the reality of her situation sank in, Zara's knees gave way, and she sank to the ground beside her trunk, wondering how long it would take to die of thirst in the Texas heat. The sound came faintly at first, the rhythmic thud of hoofbeats approaching from the west. Zara lifted her head, shielding her eyes against the glare as a lone rider appeared on the horizon. Her heart leapt with hope, then immediately constricted with fear. A lone woman at a crossroads could be easy prey for the wrong sort of man. She stood quickly, smoothing her dusty skirts and glancing around for anything that might serve as a weapon. Finding nothing, she squared her shoulders and lifted her chin, determined to face whatever came with dignity. The rider slowed as he approached, his form materializing from the heat waves rising off the trail. He rode a magnificent chestnut stallion, its coat gleaming with sweat, but its gait still strong and purposeful. The man himself cut an imposing figure, tall and broad-shouldered, with a black Stetson pulled low over his face. A rifle rested in a scabbard against his saddle, and his duster billowed slightly in the hot breeze. "Miss." His voice carried clearly across the remaining distance between them. "You all right out here?" As he drew closer, Zara could see his face beneath the hat brim, younger than she'd first thought, perhaps in his mid-20s, with a strong jaw darkened by several days' worth of stubble. His eyes, a startling clear blue, studied her with a mixture of concern and wariness. Zara's voice cracked from dryness and emotion. She swallowed hard. "I find myself in an unexpected predicament, sir." He reined his horse to a stop a respectful distance away, taking in the scene a young woman, clearly from a decent family judging by her dress, alone at a crossroads with a single trunk and no transportation in sight. "Flynn Ryder," he introduced himself, touching the brim of his hat. "Heading to Pecos. Mind telling me what brings a lady like yourself to Heartbreak Crossing with no company and no horse?" "My family decided I was a burden they could no longer bear," Zara said, surprising herself with her bluntness. "They left me here to await the stage, which apparently won't arrive for a week." Flynn's expression darkened. "They left you here, with no water, no shelter." His eyes scanned the barren landscape. "Miss, the nearest water is 10 miles east, and there's nothing but rattlesnakes and coyotes between here and there." Zara felt fresh tears threatening but blinked them back. "I'm beginning to understand that my stepfather's intention may not have been for me to reach the stage at all." Flynn dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots raising small puffs of dust as he landed. He approached slowly, as if worried about frightening her. "Your name, Miss Zara Preston," he nodded once. "Miss Preston, I can't leave you here. That would be signing your death warrant as surely as if I'd put a bullet in you myself." He gestured toward the 4 trails that met at this isolated junction. "I'll take you anywhere you need to go. Pecos, if you've got people there, or back east if that's where you're headed." Zara stared at him, searching his face for any sign of deception or ill intent. She found none, just a straightforward concern and something that looked remarkably like outrage on her behalf. "I have no people anywhere, Mr. Ryder," she admitted. "My father died years ago and my mother has chosen her new family. I have an aunt in St. Louis, but no means to reach her." Flynn considered this for a moment. "Pecos is 3 days' ride. I've got business there delivering horses to the Spencer Ranch. They're always looking for help, especially women who can cook and keep house." He gestured to his horse. "Samson here can carry double for a stretch, and I've got supplies enough. We can make it to Willow Creek by nightfall, rest there, then continue on." Zara hesitated, weighing her options. Stay and certainly perish, or trust this stranger who might have dishonorable intentions. As if reading her thoughts, Flynn stepped back. "I understand your caution, Miss Preston, but I swear on my mother's grave I mean you no harm. I was raised to help those in need, and you surely qualify." He pulled a canteen from his saddle and offered it to her. "At least take some water while you decide." The simple act of kindness, offering water in the desert, tipped the scales. Zara accepted the canteen with trembling hands and took a careful sip, then another. The water was warm but felt like heaven on her parched throat. "Thank you," she said, returning the canteen. "I believe I will accept your offer of transportation to Pecos, Mr. Ryder. I have no better options, and you seem—" She searched for the right word, "honorable." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I try to be, Miss Preston." He turned to her trunk. "What's in here that you can't leave behind?" "Everything I own in this world," she replied. "Clothes, some books, a few keepsakes from my father." Flynn nodded. "We'll have to leave it for now. I'll mark the spot. Once we reach Willow Creek, I can arrange to have someone retrieve it." He gestured toward his horse. "For now, take only what you can carry in a small bundle. We need to travel light." Zara quickly opened her trunk and gathered her most precious possessions, a change of clothes, her father's pocket watch, a small daguerreotype of her parents on their wedding day, and the worn copy of Pride and Prejudice her father had given her for her 16th birthday. She wrapped everything in a shawl and tied it securely. Flynn helped her secure the trunk, wedging it between rocks and covering it with brush to hide it from casual observation. Then he led her to his horse. "Ever ridden before?" he asked. "Yes, though not for some years." "Good. You'll ride behind me. Hold tight to my waist." With surprising gentleness for such a large man, he helped her mount, then swung up in front of her. The saddle wasn't designed for two, forcing Zara to sit pressed against his back, her arms tentatively encircling his waist. "Ready, Miss Preston?" Flynn asked, glancing over his shoulder. "Yes," she replied, though her heart hammered with uncertainty. "And please call me Zara. It seems overly formal to maintain Miss Preston when I'm clinging to your back like a burr." His shoulders shook slightly with silent laughter. "Zara it is, then. And I'm Flynn." With that, he clicked his tongue, and the horse began moving westward, away from the crossroads and into an uncertain future. Zara's muscles ached by the time they reached Willow Creek, just as twilight was painting the western sky in deep purples and golds. The settlement was little more than a cluster of buildings serving travelers along the trail, a general store with a small hotel above it, a livery stable, and a saloon. Flynn dismounted first, then reached up to help Zara down. Her legs nearly buckled when they hit the ground, unused to so many hours in the saddle. "Steady now," Flynn murmured, his strong hands supporting her elbows until she found her balance. "Thank you," she said, embarrassed by her weakness. "I'll be fine in a moment." Flynn nodded, then led his horse toward the livery. "Let's get Samson settled, then find you a proper meal and a bed for the night." The livery owner, a wizened old man named Tobias, greeted Flynn like an old friend. "Ryder, didn't expect to see you passing through again so soon." "Delivering more of those fine horses to the Spencer spread." "That I am," Flynn confirmed, handing over the reins. "Need a good rubdown for Samson here. He's carried double most of the day." Tobias's roomy eyes shifted to Zara, taking in her dusty appearance and obvious fatigue. "I see that. The missus would have my hide if I didn't ask this young lady in some kind of trouble." Flynn's expression remained neutral. "Miss Preston found herself stranded at Heartbreak Crossing. I'm escorting her to Pecos where she has prospects of employment." The old man's face softened. "Heartbreak's no place for a lady. You did right, Ryder." He turned to Zara with a kind smile. "Don't you worry, miss. Flynn here's one of the good ones. Saved my grandson from drowning in the creek last spring." Relief washed over Zara. An independent confirmation of Flynn's character was worth its weight in gold. After settling Samson, they made their way to the small hotel above the general store. The proprietress, Mrs. Leary, was a plump woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She took in Zara's disheveled state and Flynn's protective stance beside her. "We need 2 rooms for the night," Flynn said, placing coins on the counter. Mrs. Leary's eyebrows rose. "2 separate rooms?" "Yes, madam," Flynn replied firmly. "The lady has had a trying day." Understanding dawned in Mrs. Leary's eyes. "Of course. I have one at the front and one at the back. Hot water can be brought up for washing, and there's stew in the pot if you're hungry." "That would be wonderful," Zara said gratefully. Once they were settled in the small dining room with bowls of hearty beef stew and slices of fresh bread, Zara felt human again for the first time since her abandonment. Flynn ate with the efficient movements of a man accustomed to taking sustenance rather than enjoying meals, but he waited patiently as Zara savored each bite. "You mentioned business in Pecos," Zara ventured, curious about the man who had so unexpectedly become her savior. "Are you a horse trader?" Flynn finished his bite before answering. "Not exactly. I break horses for the bigger ranches. Take the wild ones nobody else wants to touch and turn them into something useful." A small smile touched his lips. "Animals make more sense to me than people most days." "Is that why you're traveling alone? You prefer the company of horses?" His eyes met hers, something unreadable flickering in their blue depths. "Partly. And partly because most folks find me too quiet for good company." He shrugged. "I say what needs saying and not much more." "I find that refreshing," Zara admitted. "My stepfather never stopped talking, usually about himself or his complaints. Silence can be a comfort." Flynn studied her for a long moment. "Your people, they just left you there. No money, no protection." Zara dropped her gaze to her bowl. "My stepfather never wanted me. When my father died, my mother remarried quickly for security. Walter, my stepfather, made it clear I was tolerated, not welcomed, when the drought made things difficult." She swallowed hard. "He convinced my mother they couldn't afford to feed me anymore." "That's no excuse," Flynn said, his voice low and tight with anger. "A man protects those in his care, even when times are hard." "Not all men are like you, Mr. Ryder." "Flynn," he corrected automatically. "Flynn," she echoed with a small smile. "What about your family?" "You mentioned your mother's grave." A shadow passed over his face. "Lost her to fever when I was 14. Father died in the war. It's been just me since then." "I'm sorry," Zara said softly. "Being alone in the world is a difficult burden. You get used to it." He pushed his empty bowl away. But you don't have to face it just yet. I meant what I said about the Spencer Ranch. They're good people. Mrs. Spencer lost her daughter last winter and could use a young woman's help. It wouldn't be easy work, but you'd have a roof and food, maybe even wages eventually. Zara nodded slowly. I'm not afraid of hard work. I kept my mother's house after my father died, and I can cook, clean, and sew. I was even teaching the younger children their letters before. Before they abandoned you, Flynn finished bluntly. Their loss. Spencer has 4 young ones who could use some education. His wife tries, but running a ranch household leaves little time for schooling. A spark of hope kindled in Zara's chest. Perhaps this terrible day would lead to something better after all. Thank you, she said, meaning it more deeply than the simple words could convey. Not just for the offer of employment, but for stopping it all. Most men would have ridden past. Flynn's expression softened slightly. Most men haven't seen what happens to those left behind. He stood abruptly. You should rest. We leave at first light. It's a long ride to the next settlement. That night, in the small but clean room above the general store, Zara washed away the dust of the trail and changed into her one spare dress. As she combed through her long auburn hair, she found herself thinking of Flynn Ryder's quiet strength and unexpected kindness. There was something comforting about his taciturn nature. He didn't waste words or make promises he couldn't keep. In a world that had proved unreliable, his straightforward manner was an anchor. For the first time since watching her family's wagon disappear, Zara felt the crushing weight of abandonment lift slightly. Perhaps there was a future for her after all, one that didn't depend on the charity of reluctant relatives or the mercies of strangers. Morning came too quickly. Zara awoke to the sound of activity downstairs, the store opening for the day's business. She dressed hastily and pinned her hair in a simple style, aware that another long day in the saddle lay ahead. Flynn was already in the dining room, drinking coffee and studying a weathered map spread on the table. He looked up when she entered, nodding in greeting. "Sleep well?" he asked, folding the map. "Better than I expected," Zara admitted, "though I dreamed of endless riding." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Today will make that dream come true, I'm afraid. We've got a hard day ahead to reach the next water." Mrs. Leary bustled in with a plate of eggs and bacon for Zara. "Eat up, dear. You'll need your strength. I've packed some bread and cheese for your midday meal as well." "That's very kind of you," Zara said gratefully. "Nonsense. Can't have you falling off that horse from hunger." She looked between them. "Your trunk's been loaded on the supply wagon heading to Pecos tomorrow. Should arrive a day or two after you." Flynn nodded his thanks. "I appreciate your arranging that, Mrs. Leary. Least I could do. Now finish up. The day's wasting." After breakfast, Flynn led Zara to the livery where Samson stood saddled and ready. The big chestnut horse seemed rested and eager to be moving. Flynn checked the cinches one last time, then helped Zara mount behind the saddle again. "It'll be rough going today," he warned as he swung up in front of her. "Hold tight and let me know if you need to stop." "I will," she promised, settling her arms around his waist with less hesitation than the day before. They rode out of Willow Creek as the sun cleared the eastern horizon, casting long shadows across the trail ahead. Flynn set a steady pace, mindful of the extra weight Samson carried. They spoke little during the morning, each lost in their own thoughts as the landscape rolled by. By midday, the sun beat down mercilessly. Flynn guided them to a stand of cottonwoods beside a nearly dry creek bed, one of the few spots of shade visible for miles. "We'll rest here a while," he said, dismounting and helping Zara down. "Let Samson drink and cool off." Zara's legs trembled as they took her weight again. 2 days of riding had left muscles she didn't know she had aching in protest. She tried not to wince as she walked stiffly to the creek. "You're doing well," Flynn observed, handing her the canteen. "Most city folk would be complaining by now." "I'm not from the city," Zara replied. "We had a small farm before the drought. I'm used to discomfort." She took a careful sip of water. "Though I admit I've never ridden this far before." Flynn nodded, then busied himself with retrieving the food Mrs. Leary had packed. They sat in the dappled shade, eating bread and cheese in companionable silence. Zara found herself studying Flynn's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the slight furrow between his brows that seemed permanent, the way his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, alert to any potential threat. "May I ask you something personal?" she ventured. His eyes flicked to her face. "You can ask, might not answer." "Fair enough." Zara hesitated, then pressed on. "How did you come to be a horse breaker? It seems a solitary profession." Flynn chewed thoughtfully before answering. "After my mother died, I had few options. Was too young for the war, had no family to take me in. Ended up working at a livery stable for room and board." His expression softened slightly. "Always had a way with horses, even the mean ones. Owner noticed and started giving me the difficult cases. Word spread. By 18, I was breaking horses for every ranch within 50 miles. "You found your calling," Zara observed. "Suppose I did." He glanced at her. "What about you? What would you have done if your family hadn't?" He trailed off, clearly not wanting to bring up painful memories. "If I'd had a choice," Zara smiled wistfully, "I would have liked to be a teacher. My father taught me to read and value education. He said knowledge was the one thing no one could ever take from you." Her smile faded. "But girls like me rarely get such opportunities. Marriage was expected, though my stepfather made it clear I brought no dowry to tempt a husband." Flynn's expression darkened. "Some men value more than money in a wife, perhaps, but I never stayed in one place long enough to find out." Zara brushed crumbs from her skirt. "And now here I am, heading to Pecos to become a housekeeper. Life takes unexpected turns." "That it does." Flynn stood, offering his hand to help her up. "We should keep moving. Still a long way to go." As they continued their journey, the landscape gradually changed, the flat plains giving way to more varied terrain with rolling hills and the occasional rocky outcropping. By late afternoon, dark clouds began building on the western horizon. "Storm coming," Flynn observed, urging Samson to a faster pace. "We need to reach Serpent's Pass before it hits." "Serpent's Pass," Zara echoed, tightening her hold as the horse's gait quickened. "Narrow canyon that cuts through those hills ahead. It's the fastest route to Green Valley, where we'll spend the night, if we get caught in the open when that storm hits." He left the sentence unfinished, but Zara understood the implications. The wind picked up as they approached the hills, bringing with it the smell of rain and the distant rumble of thunder. Samson's ears flicked nervously, but he maintained his steady lope, eating up the miles with ground-covering strides. The entrance to Serpent's Pass appeared suddenly, a narrow gap between towering rock walls that twisted out of sight. Flynn reined Samson to a walk as they entered the canyon, the temperature dropping noticeably in the shadow of the cliffs. "Stay alert," Flynn murmured. "This pass has been used for ambushes before." Zara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cooler air. "Bandits?" "Sometimes. More often rogue Comanche or Apache. Most tribes keep the peace these days, but there are always those who don't follow the treaties." His hand drifted to the rifle in its scabbard. "Keep your eyes open and tell me if you see anything moving." They proceeded cautiously through the winding canyon, the only sounds the clop of Samson's hooves on stone and the increasingly insistent rumble of thunder. The storm was moving faster than Flynn had anticipated, the sky darkening ominously above the narrow strip visible between the canyon walls. "We need to hurry," Flynn said, urging Samson to a trot where the footing allowed. "If this canyon floods—" He never finished the sentence. A deafening crack of thunder directly overhead spooked Samson, who reared in panic. Flynn, caught off guard, fought to control the frightened horse. Zara, clinging desperately to Flynn's waist, felt herself slipping from the horse's back. "Flynn!" She cried out as she lost her grip and tumbled to the ground, landing hard on the rocky canyon floor. Pain shot through her ankle as she hit, stealing her breath. Above, lightning illuminated the canyon in stark white, followed immediately by another thunderclap that echoed off the walls. Samson reared again, nearly throwing Flynn before bolting forward down the canyon. "Zara!" Flynn shouted, fighting to turn the panicked horse. He managed to circle back, bringing Samson to a prancing, nervous halt beside her. "Are you hurt?" "My ankle," she gasped, clutching the injured limb. "I think it's just twisted, not broken." Flynn dismounted in one fluid motion, keeping a tight grip on the reins as Samson continued to dance nervously. "Can you stand?" With Flynn's support, Zara managed to get to her feet, wincing as she put weight on her injured ankle. "I can walk," she said, though her face betrayed the pain each step would cost. "No time," Flynn decided as the first heavy raindrops began to fall. "Storm's on us. We need to get through this canyon before it floods." In one powerful movement, he lifted Zara and placed her in the saddle, then swung up behind her. "Hold onto the pommel. I'll keep you steady." With his arms around her, maintaining the reins, Flynn urged Samson forward again. The rain quickly intensified, becoming a driving downpour that reduced visibility to mere yards. Water began streaming down the canyon walls and pooling on the floor, making the footing treacherous. "Almost there," Flynn called over the roar of the storm, his breath warm against her ear. Just around this bend, the canyon widened suddenly, opening onto a small valley surrounded by pine-covered hills. Through the curtain of rain, Zara could make out buildings ahead, a cluster of structures that must be Green Valley. They rode into the settlement as the full fury of the storm broke over them, rain coming down in blinding sheets. Flynn guided Samson directly to the largest building, a two-story structure with a wide porch. Even before they fully stopped, a man emerged, waving them in. "Get under cover, quick!" The stranger shouted over the storm's roar. Rivers rising fast. Flynn dismounted first, then reached up for Zara, lifting her down carefully to avoid putting weight on her injured ankle. He supported her with an arm around her waist as they hurried under the porch roof, Samson following behind, clearly eager to escape the deluge. "Thought no one would be fool enough to be in the pass during this blow," the man said, taking Samson's reins. "Lucky you made it through before the flood." "Luck had little to do with it," Flynn replied grimly. "Horse spooked at the thunder, the lady's hurt her ankle. You have rooms available for the storm?" "Certainly. I'm Everett Daniels. This is the Green Valley Trading Post and Inn." He looked closely at Zara, noting her pallor and the way she favored her right foot. "Let's get you inside, miss. My wife can take a look at that ankle." The interior of the trading post was warm and surprisingly well appointed for such a remote location. A large room served as both store and common area, with tables where travelers could take meals. A robust fire burned in a stone hearth, casting welcome heat and light throughout the space. "Martha," Daniels called, "got injured travelers here." A small, energetic woman with graying hair pulled back in a neat bun emerged from a back room, wiping her hands on an apron. Her sharp eyes took in the situation immediately. "Bring her to the fire," she instructed, clearing a space on a bench near the hearth. "Everett, fetch my medicine box." Flynn guided Zara to the bench, helping her sit and propping her injured leg on a footstool Martha quickly provided. "I'll see to your horse," Daniels said to Flynn. "Got a good stable out back. He'll be dry and fed within the hour." Flynn nodded his thanks, then turned his attention back to Zara as Martha gently removed her boot and examined the swollen ankle. "No break, just a bad sprain," Martha pronounced after careful probing that made Zara bite her lip to keep from crying out. "Cold compresses, then wrapping. You'll need to stay off it for a few days. We're expected in Pecos," Flynn said, frowning. "Well, you won't make Pecos with her riding on that ankle," Martha replied firmly. "Not unless you want her crippled. The swelling needs time to go down." Zara looked up at Flynn, distress clear in her eyes. "I'm so sorry. I've delayed your business." "Don't apologize for something that wasn't your fault," he said, his voice gentler than she'd heard before. "Spencer can wait a few more days for his horses." "The horses aren't with you?" Martha asked as she applied a cold compress to Zara's ankle. "They're being driven separately by my partner. Slower route, but safer for a small herd." Flynn's expression remained unreadable, but Zara thought she detected concern in the set of his shoulders. "I was supposed to arrive ahead to make preparations." "Well, you can send word with the male coach tomorrow," Daniels suggested, returning from settling Sampson. "It passes through on the way to Pecos, weather permitting." Flynn nodded, clearly working through this change in plans. "We'll need rooms for at least 2 nights then." "Got a nice one at the back for the lady," Martha said, "and the loft room for you, both with proper beds and washstands." She finished wrapping Zara's ankle with practiced efficiency. "There now. Keep it elevated when you can, and no weight on it for at least a day." Zara thanked her, feeling simultaneously relieved that her injury wasn't worse and guilty for delaying Flynn's journey. He had already gone far beyond what most would do for a stranger, and now he was further inconvenienced. "You must be starving," Martha continued. "I've got venison stew and fresh bread. Everett, help the lady to that table by the fire while I fetch them some supper." With Daniels's assistance, Zara hobbled to the indicated table. Flynn followed, his expression thoughtful. "You should go on ahead," Zara said quietly once they were seated. "I can follow when my ankle heals. The Daniels seem kind. I'm sure they'd help me arrange transportation." Flynn's blue eyes fixed on her face. "You suggesting I abandon you at another crossroads, Zara?" The question, asked so directly, made her flush. "Of course not, but you have obligations in Pecos. I've already imposed enough on your generosity." "It's not an imposition," he said firmly. "I gave my word to see you safely to Pecos. That's what I'll do." His expression softened marginally. "Besides, those horses won't suffer for a few extra days of grazing. And you need time to heal before facing another long ride." Before Zara could respond, Martha returned with bowls of fragrant stew and thick slices of bread slathered with butter. The aroma made Zara's stomach growl, reminding her that their midday meal had been meager. "Eat up," Martha encouraged. "Nothing heals the body like good food and proper rest." The stew was delicious, rich with tender venison and root vegetables harvested before the drought took hold. Zara ate with enthusiasm, realizing how hungry she truly was. Flynn ate steadily as well, though his eyes frequently went to the windows where rain continued to lash against the glass. "Worried about the canyon?" Daniels asked, noticing Flynn's glances. Flynn nodded. "How long before it's passable again?" "Depends on how much rain we get. Serpent's Pass can flood for days if it's a big storm." Daniels sipped from a mug of coffee. "But the mail coach has an alternate route, longer but safer. If you're dead set on reaching Pecos sooner, you could take that tomorrow." Zara felt her heart sink at the thought of Flynn leaving, though she knew it would be the sensible course of action. To her surprise, he shook his head. "I'll wait for the canyon to clear. No point leaving Miss Preston stranded. Your wife and I are hardly the abandoning type," Daniel said with a chuckle. "She'd be well looked after." "All the same," Flynn replied, his tone brooking no argument, "I'll stay until she can travel safely." Zara felt a warmth spread through her that had nothing to do with the fire or the stew. Despite his taciturn nature, Flynn had a deeply ingrained sense of responsibility. He wouldn't leave her behind, even when presented with a reasonable alternative. After supper, with her ankle carefully elevated on a footstool, Zara found herself enjoying the unexpected respite. The trading post gradually filled with other local residents seeking company during the storm. Someone produced a fiddle, and soon lively music filled the room, creating an atmosphere of impromptu celebration despite the tempest outside. Flynn remained by Zara's side, quiet but attentive. He declined invitations to join the dancing but seemed content to watch the proceedings, occasionally offering brief comments on the locals' antics. "You don't enjoy social gatherings?" Zara asked during a lull in the music. Flynn shrugged. "Don't mind watching. Never been much for participating." He glanced at her. "You'd rather be dancing, I expect." Zara smiled ruefully, gesturing to her bandaged ankle. "Not tonight, certainly, but yes, I do enjoy dancing when the opportunity arises, which isn't often." She watched as couples swirled around the cleared space in the center of the room. There's something freeing about it, forgetting propriety and care for a few minutes. Flynn studied her face, something unreadable in his expression. "Maybe when your ankle heals," he said finally, surprising her. "Maybe," she agreed, though she couldn't imagine the reserved horseman voluntarily taking to the dance floor. As the evening progressed, Zara found her eyelids growing heavy despite the continuing festivities. Flynn noticed immediately. "You need rest," he said, rising. "I'll help you to your room." Martha, ever vigilant, appeared with a walking stick. "This will help you keep weight off that ankle. The back room is ready whenever you are, dear." With Flynn's steadying hand at her elbow and the walking stick, Zara made her way to the small but comfortable bedroom Martha had prepared. A lamp burned low on the bedside table, illuminating a narrow bed with clean linens, a washstand with a pitcher of water, and a small chest for her few belongings. "Thank you," Zara said, turning to Flynn at the doorway. "For everything." Most men wouldn't have stopped at all, let alone gone to such lengths. Flynn's expression remained impassive, but his eyes softened slightly. "Get some rest, Zara. I'll check on you in the morning." After he left, Zara carefully changed into her nightgown, washed as best she could without disturbing her bandaged ankle, and slipped beneath the covers. Despite the continuing storm outside and the unfamiliar surroundings, she fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted by the day's events. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having moved on during the night, though its effects remained visible. From her window, Zara could see puddles and debris scattered across the trading post's yard. Men were already at work clearing fallen branches and repairing minor damage to outbuildings. A soft knock at her door announced Martha, bearing a tray with breakfast and fresh bandages for her ankle. "How are you feeling this morning, dear?" the older woman asked, setting the tray on a small table. "Much better, thank you," Zara replied truthfully. "The swelling seems reduced." Martha nodded approvingly as she examined the ankle. "Good progress. Still, you need at least another day of rest before attempting to ride again." She began rewrapping the injury with clean bandages. "Your young man was up at dawn, helping Everett clear debris. Quite the worker, that one." Zara felt her cheeks warm. "He's not my young man, Mr. Ryder found me abandoned at a crossroads and offered assistance. We're merely traveling companions. Martha's knowing smile suggested she didn't entirely believe this explanation. Is that so? Well, he's mighty protective for a mere traveling companion. Wouldn't hear of leaving you behind, even with the canyon flooded and his business waiting. He's an honorable man, Zara said simply, unsure how else to explain Flynn's actions. That he is, Martha agreed, finishing with the bandage. And handsome too, if you don't mind my saying so. She patted Zara's hand. Eat your breakfast while it's hot. I'll send word to Mr. Ryder that you're awake. Left alone, Zara contemplated Martha's words as she ate the hearty breakfast of eggs, bacon, and biscuits. Flynn was undeniably handsome in a rugged way, and his quiet strength was reassuring, but she had no illusions about their relationship. He had helped her out of basic human decency, nothing more. Once they reached Pecos, he would continue his solitary life breaking horses, and she would begin her new existence as a housekeeper. Their paths had crossed briefly, but would soon diverge again. Still, as she finished her breakfast, Zara couldn't deny a flutter of anticipation at the thought of seeing Flynn again. He arrived shortly after she'd finished eating, knocking softly before entering at her invitation. He looked fresh despite the morning's labor, having clearly taken time to wash and change his shirt. Morning, he said simply. Ankle better. Much, Zara confirmed. Martha thinks another day of rest will have me fit to travel. Flynn nodded, seeming pleased with this news. Canyon's still flooded. Daniels thinks it'll be clear by tomorrow afternoon if no more rain comes. He hesitated, then added, wrote a letter to Spencer explaining the delay. Mail coach took it this morning. I'm sorry for causing such inconvenience, Zara said, feeling a renewed surge of guilt. Stop apologizing, Flynn replied, his tone firm but not unkind. Wasn't your fault Samson spooked. A faint smile touched his lips. Horse has more to apologize for than you do. Zara couldn't help but laugh at that. How is Samson this morning, recovered from his fright? Acting like nothing happened. Typical. Flynn glanced around the small room, seeming suddenly aware of the impropriety of being alone with her in her bedroom. If you're feeling up to it, Martha suggested you might want to sit on the back porch. Gets good sun this time of day. I'd like that, Zara said eagerly, tired of confinement after just one night. If you wouldn't mind helping me. Flynn offered his arm for support, and with the walking stick Martha had provided, Zara managed to hobble to the trading post's back porch. It was a pleasant space, furnished with several comfortable chairs overlooking a small kitchen garden, and beyond that, rolling hills covered with pine trees. Flynn settled her in a chair with her injured leg propped on a stool, then turned as if to leave. You don't have to go, Zara said quickly, surprising herself with her boldness. Unless you have other tasks, he paused, then took the chair beside hers. Finish the urgent repairs. Rest can wait. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching birds dart among the garden plants and listening to the distant sounds of men working to clear more storm damage. Will you tell me about Pecos? Zara asked eventually. I know so little about where I'm heading. Flynn seemed to relax slightly at the neutral topic. It's growing fast. The railroad's coming through next year, they say. Already has a proper main street with a hotel, several saloons, a bank, even a small school. He glanced at her. Might be opportunity there for someone wanting to teach. Zara's heart quickened at the thought. Really? I had assumed it would be a much smaller settlement. Was, a few years back, but good grazing land and the promise of the railroad has brought people. The Spencer Ranch is about 5 miles outside town. Good location, plenty of water even in the drought. As Flynn continued describing Pecos and the surrounding area, Zara found herself picturing a life there not just as a housekeeper, but perhaps eventually as the teacher she'd always dreamed of becoming. For the first time since her abandonment, the future seemed to hold promise rather than just uncertainty. "You make it sound almost like home," she said when Flynn finished his description. Something flickered in his eyes. "Could be, for those wanting to put down roots. And you? Does Pecos feel like home to you?" Flynn looked toward the distant hills. "Never stayed in one place long enough to call it home. Go where the work takes me." "That sounds lonely," Zara observed quietly. "Used to it," he replied with a shrug. But there was a hint of something regret, perhaps in his voice. Before Zara could respond, Martha appeared with a tray bearing glasses of lemonade and a plate of cookies. "Thought you two might enjoy a little refreshment," she said, setting the tray on a small table between their chairs. "Such a beautiful day after the storm." "Thank you, Martha," Zara said warmly. "You've been so kind." "Nonsense. It's a pleasure having young company." Martha's eyes twinkled. "Especially young company with such interesting stories. Mr. Ryder was telling Everett how he found you at Heartbreak Crossing. Quite the dramatic tale." Zara glanced at Flynn, wondering exactly what he'd shared about her circumstances. "Didn't give details that weren't mine to give," he said quietly after Martha had bustled back inside. "Just explained why we were traveling together." "I appreciate that," Zara said, relieved. "It's not that I'm ashamed of what happened, but it's private," Flynn finished for her. "No one's business but yours." Zara nodded gratefully. They sipped their lemonade in silence for a while, watching clouds drift across the impossibly blue sky. It was strange, Zara thought, how comfortable she felt with Flynn despite knowing him for only a few days. Perhaps shared adversity created bonds more quickly than normal acquaintance. "May I ask you something personal?" Flynn said suddenly, echoing her question from the day before. Surprised, Zara nodded. "Of course." Flynn seemed to consider his words carefully before speaking. "Your stepfather, was he unkind to you? Beyond the abandonment, I mean." The question caught Zara off guard. She stared into her lemonade, gathering her thoughts. "He was cold. Never struck me, if that's what you're asking, but made it clear I was unwelcome. A reminder of my mother's past that he wanted forgotten." She sighed softly. "The worst part was watching my mother change, become smaller somehow. She stopped defending me, stopped even seeing me in some ways." Flynn's expression darkened. "No excuse for either of them." "No," Zara agreed. "But I've decided not to carry their betrayal with me. It would only poison whatever life I build for myself." Flynn studied her face, something like admiration in his eyes. "That's wise." "Not wise," Zara corrected with a small smile. "Necessary. I can't change what they did, only how I respond to it." Flynn nodded slowly, as if filing this philosophy away for consideration. "The Spencer family, they're good people, not like your stepfather. They'll treat you fairly." "I'm grateful for the opportunity," Zara said. "And for your bringing me to them." The rest of the day passed pleasantly. Zara spent much of it on the porch, reading a book Martha had lent her while Flynn assisted with various repairs around the trading post. He checked on her periodically, bringing water or simply sitting quietly beside her for a few minutes before returning to his tasks. By evening, Zara's ankle felt significantly improved. She was able to join the others in the main room for supper, though she still used the walking stick for support. The meal was festive, with several neighbors joining them, bringing dishes to share in thanks for the Daniels' hospitality during the storm. Flynn sat beside Zara, quieter than the boisterous locals but not uncomfortably so. She noticed how he listened more than he spoke, his blue eyes taking in everything around them. Occasionally, when something amusing was said, His lips would quirk in a hint of a smile, and Zara found herself watching for those rare expressions. After the meal, someone again produced a fiddle and impromptu dancing began. Zara watched wistfully, tapping her good foot in time with the lively tunes. "Wish you could join them?" Flynn asked, noticing her interest. "Yes," she admitted. "I've always loved dancing, my father used to." She trailed off, memories suddenly bittersweet. "Used to what?" Flynn prompted gently. "He'd dance with me in our kitchen when I was small, said every lady should know how to waltz properly." Zara smiled at the memory. "He'd put my feet on top of his boots and whirl me around until we were both dizzy." Flynn's expression softened. "Sounds like a good father. The best," Zara agreed. "I miss him still." Flynn was silent for a moment, then stood and offered his hand. "Can't put your feet on my boots, but I could help you stand for one dance, if you're careful with that ankle." Zara stared at him in surprise. "You dance?" A hint of color touched his cheeks. "Not well, but I know the steps to a waltz." Heart quickening, Zara took his offered hand and allowed him to help her to her feet. With his support, she was able to put minimal weight on her injured ankle. "Just lean on me," Flynn said quietly, slipping an arm around her waist. The fiddler, seeing them, smoothly transitioned to a waltz. Flynn guided Zara in a small, careful circle, bearing most of her weight. They weren't so much dancing as swaying together, but Zara found herself breathless all the same. Flynn's arm was strong around her waist, his hand warm where it clasped hers. "Thank you," she murmured, looking up to find him watching her with an intensity that made her heart flutter. "For what?" "For this. For understanding why it matters." Something shifted in Flynn's expression, a softening, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. For a moment, Zara thought he might say something more, but he simply nodded and continued guiding her in their gentle approximation of a waltz. When the music ended, Flynn helped Zara back to her seat. His hand lingered on hers a moment longer than necessary, and Zara felt the loss of his touch when he finally stepped away. The next morning brought clear skies, and good news Serpent's Pass had drained enough to be passable by midday. Flynn confirmed this himself, riding out at dawn to check the conditions and returning with word that they could leave after lunch. "Are you certain your ankle is strong enough?" Martha fussed as she helped Zara pack her few belongings. "You're welcome to stay longer if needed." "It's much better today," Zara assured her, demonstrating by walking across the room with only a slight limp and no walking stick. "And I don't want to delay Mr. Ryder's business any further." Martha gave her a knowing look. "That man would wait a month if you needed it, dear." "Haven't seen a fellow so taken with a lady in many years." Zara felt her cheeks warm. "He's simply being kind, it's his nature." "Is it now?" Martha's smile suggested she knew better. "Well, it's a day-and-a-half ride to Pecos still, plenty of time for nature to take its course." Despite her embarrassment at Martha's implication, Zara couldn't help the small flutter of hope that rose in her chest. Flynn had shown her nothing but respect and kindness, but there had been moments during their dance, in the way his eyes sometimes lingered on her face, that suggested he might feel something more than obligation. By early afternoon, they were ready to depart. The Daniels had provided them with ample supplies for the remainder of their journey, refusing payment beyond what Flynn had already offered for their rooms. "Consider it our contribution to your fresh start, dear," Martha said, embracing Zara warmly. "And do write to let us know how you settle in Pecos." "I will," Zara promised, genuinely touched by the couple's generosity. Flynn helped Zara mount Samson, then swung up behind her. This time, he arranged her to sit side saddle in front of him rather than behind, his arm secure around her waist. "More comfortable for your ankle this way," he explained, his voice close to her ear. "Tell me if you need to stop." They set off amid waves and good wishes from the Daniels and several locals who had gathered to see them off. The trail led first through pine-forested hills before descending toward more open country. Serpent's Pass showed clear evidence of the recent flood debris caught on rocks. Mud still drying on the canyon walls, but the path through was clear and firm enough for safe passage. Zara found herself instinctively leaning closer to Flynn as they navigated the narrow trail, remembering her fall. His arm tightened slightly around her waist in response, a silent reassurance. Once through the pass, they made good time across rolling grasslands. Flynn kept up a steady stream of information about the terrain and landmarks, more talkative than Zara had yet seen him. She wondered if he was making a special effort to distract her from any discomfort, or if he was simply becoming more comfortable in her company. They stopped for the night at a small way station, little more than a cabin with a stable attached, maintained by an elderly couple for the convenience of travelers on the Pecos Trail. The accommodations were rustic but clean, with a small room for Zara and a spot in the stable loft for Flynn. After a simple supper of beans, bacon, and cornbread shared with their hosts, Flynn and Zara sat on the cabin's porch, watching twilight settle over the land. The first stars were appearing in the darkening sky, and a cool breeze carried the scent of sage and distant rain. "Should reach Pecos by tomorrow afternoon," Flynn said, breaking a comfortable silence. "Spencer's ranch is a bit further, but we can stay in town if you're too tired to continue." Zara nodded, suddenly reluctant for their journey to end. These days with Flynn, despite the circumstances that brought them together, had awakened something in her, a sense of possibility, of connection she hadn't expected to find. "What will you do after you deliver the horses?" she asked, watching his profile in the fading light. Flynn considered the question. "Got offers from ranches further west, California way. Good money breaking horses for the big spreads there." "California," Zara echoed, her heart sinking at the thought of him traveling so far. "That's quite a journey." "It is," he agreed. "Been thinking about it for some time. New start, maybe." "I understand the appeal of that," Zara said softly. Flynn turned to look at her fully, his expression unusually open. "Zara," whatever he had been about to say was interrupted by their elderly host calling them inside, warning of coyotes that grew bold after dark. The moment broken, Flynn stood and offered Zara his hand. "Should rest," he said, his usual reticence returning. "Long day tomorrow." That night, lying on the narrow cot in her small room, Zara found sleep elusive. She thought of Flynn traveling to California, continuing his solitary existence breaking horses on distant ranches. She thought of herself at the Spencer Ranch, making a new life among strangers. Separate paths, diverging after this brief intersection. The thought brought an unexpected ache to her chest. In just a few days, Flynn Ryder had become important to her in ways she hadn't anticipated. His quiet strength, his unfailing decency, the rare smiles that transformed his serious face, these had worked their way into her heart despite all her practical intentions to guard against such feelings. Morning arrived too quickly. They set out at dawn, Flynn again arranging Zara to sit side-saddle before him, his arm secure around her waist. The day warmed quickly as the sun climbed higher, the terrain gradually changing to the more arid landscape typical of the region around Pecos. They spoke little during the morning's ride, each lost in their own thoughts. Zara was acutely aware of Flynn's proximity, the solid warmth of his chest at her back, the gentle pressure of his arm around her waist, the rhythm of his breathing. She memorized these sensations, knowing their time together was drawing to a close. By midday, the first buildings of Pecos appeared on the horizon, a church steeple, the blocky silhouette of a water tower, the scattered structures of a growing frontier town. Flynn pointed out landmarks as they drew closer, his voice betraying no emotion at reaching their destination. Main Street has a proper hotel, the Pecos House. We can get you settled there while I send word to Spencer about your arrival. Is it expensive? Zara asked, suddenly concerned about her complete lack of funds. Flynn's arm tightened slightly around her waist. Don't worry about that. I've got funds enough. You've already done so much, Zara protested. I can't keep accepting your charity. Not charity, Flynn said firmly. Just helping someone who deserves better than what life's dealt them. The sentiment, so simply stated, brought unexpected tears to Zara's eyes. She blinked them away hastily, grateful that Flynn couldn't see her face from his position behind her. Pecos proved larger and more developed than Zara had imagined. The main street boasted wooden sidewalks, a variety of businesses, and even a few buildings constructed of brick rather than wood. People moved about with purpose, cowboys lounging outside saloons, women shopping at the general store, children playing in the dusty street. Flynn guided Sampson directly to the Pecos house, a two-story structure with a wide veranda and clean windows. He dismounted first, then reached up to help Zara down, his hands strong and steady at her waist. "Wait here," he said, tying Sampson to the hitching post. "I'll arrange a room." Zara nodded, suddenly feeling exposed and vulnerable standing alone on the busy street. After days of Flynn's protective presence, the prospect of independence was both liberating and terrifying. She watched as he disappeared into the hotel, his tall figure commanding respect even in this town of rugged men. He returned moments later, a room key in hand. "Got you a room for tonight. Spencer's wife is in town tomorrow. She can meet you then." He hesitated, then added, "Thought it best to give you time to rest before making decisions." Gratitude washed over Zara. Once again, Flynn had considered her needs before convenience. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything." Flynn nodded, his expression unreadable as he gathered her small bundle of belongings and led the way into the hotel. The lobby was modest but clean, with polished floors and simple furnishings. A narrow staircase led to the upper floor where the guest rooms were located. The room itself was small but comfortable, a bed with a patchwork quilt, a washstand with pitcher and basin, a small writing desk beneath a window overlooking the main street. After the hardships of the trail, it seemed luxurious. "Will this do?" Flynn asked, setting her bundle on the bed. "It's perfect," Zara assured him. "More than I expected." Flynn nodded, seeming relieved. "Good. I need to see about my horses. Send word to Spencer." He paused, his hand on the doorknob. Would you care to have supper with me? The hotel dining room is decent, they say." The invitation surprised Zara, though it shouldn't have. Of course Flynn wouldn't simply drop her at the hotel and disappear. "I'd like that very much," she said, hoping her voice didn't betray the sudden quickening of her pulse. 6 o'clock then," Flynn said. "I'll come to your door." After he left, Zara took advantage of the privacy to properly wash and change into her last clean dress, a simple blue cotton that had been packed in her trunk. Her hair, free from its pins, fell in waves past her shoulders. She brushed it thoroughly before arranging it in a more sophisticated style than she'd been able to manage during their journey. Looking at her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand, Zara hardly recognized herself. Something had changed in her face, a new confidence, perhaps, or simply the knowledge that she had survived abandonment and found strength she hadn't known she possessed. At precisely 6 o'clock, a knock sounded at her door. Zara opened it to find Flynn waiting, his appearance transformed by a clean shirt, freshly trimmed beard, and hair still damp from washing. He looked younger somehow, less weathered though no less imposing. "You look nice," he said, the words seeming inadequate for what his eyes expressed. "As do you," Zara replied, a slight blush warming her cheeks. The hotel dining room was busy but not crowded, filled with a mix of travelers, local businessmen, and a few respectable-looking couples. They were shown to a small table near a window, a white cloth and actual glassware marking this as an establishment of some pretension for a frontier town. After ordering from a surprisingly varied menu, they fell into conversation about Pecos and its prospects. Flynn seemed to know a great deal about the town despite not living there permanently. "You've spent much time here?" Zara asked, curious about his familiarity. "Come through a few times a year," Flynn replied, "breaking horses for Spencer and other ranchers in the area. Town grows faster each time." "It seems quite civilized," Zara observed, watching a well-dressed woman at a nearby table. "I'd expected something more primitive." Flynn's lips quirked in that rare half-smile. "Disappointment or relief?" "Relief," Zara admitted with a small laugh. "Though I was prepared for either." Their food arrived: roast beef with potatoes for Flynn, chicken and dumplings for Zara, and they ate with appreciation for the first properly prepared meal they'd had since leaving the Daniels trading post. "The Spencer Ranch," Zara ventured after a while. "What are they like? The family, I mean," Flynn considered before answering. "Joseph Spencer's a fair man, tough but not mean, built his ranch from nothing 10 years back. His wife, Eleanor, comes from back east Boston, I think, brought education and refinement with her." He paused. "Lost their oldest daughter to fever last winter. Hit them hard. 4 children remain: 2 boys, 2 girls, aged between 4 and 12. And they need household help. And teaching for the children," Flynn added meaningfully. "Eleanor's been trying to manage both, but it's too much with the ranch growing." Zara felt a flutter of excitement. "You think she might allow me to teach them?" "Worth asking," Flynn said with a nod. "She values education highly." They finished their meal with renewed optimism about Zara's prospects. As they left the dining room, Flynn suggested a short walk to see more of the town while daylight remained. The evening was pleasant, the heat of the day giving way to a comfortable warmth. Pecos was lively at this hour, with saloons doing brisk business and locals strolling the boardwalks, exchanging greetings and news. Flynn pointed out various establishments as they walked: the general store, the gunsmith, the small schoolhouse at the end of the street that served the town's children when a teacher was available. "Town council's been trying to hire a permanent teacher," he mentioned casually. "Last one left to get married 6 months ago. Children have had sporadic schooling since." Zara's steps slowed as she processed this information. "Are you suggesting?" Flynn shrugged, his expression carefully neutral. "Just mentioning it. Options are good to have." The possibility of actually becoming a proper teacher, not just tutoring children on a ranch, sent Zara's thoughts racing. It seemed too perfect, too aligned with her long-held dreams to be real. "You think I could qualify?" she asked, trying to temper her sudden excitement. "I have no formal training, just what my father taught me and my own studies." "Town's not in a position to be particular," Flynn replied. "Anyone educated and willing would be considered, I'd wager." They had reached the schoolhouse, a simple white painted building with a small bell tower. Though closed for the evening, it radiated possibility to Zara's hopeful eyes. "It's something to consider," she said softly, touching the weathered wood of the door frame. "Though I shouldn't get ahead of myself. The position with the Spencers is what's certain." Flynn watched her, something unreadable in his eyes. "You should take the option that makes you happiest, Zara. You deserve that much after what you've been through." The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. Thank you for believing that. It means more than I can say." They returned to the hotel as twilight deepened into evening. At her door, Flynn paused, seeming uncharacteristically hesitant. "I need to check on my horses at the livery," he said finally. "But I'll be back at the hotel tonight. Room at the end of the hall if you need anything." "Will I see you tomorrow?" Zara asked, suddenly anxious about facing Mrs. Spencer alone. "I'll go with you to meet her," Flynn assured her. "My business with Spencer can wait another day." Relief washed over Zara. "Thank you for everything, Flynn. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stopped at that crossroads." Something flickered in his eyes, pain, perhaps, or memory. "I know what would have happened," he said quietly. "That's why I stopped." Before Zara could question his meaning, Flynn touched the brim of an imaginary hat, having left his Stetson in his room, and turned to go. "Sleep well, Zara." Alone in her room, Zara sat on the edge of the bed, thoughts swirling. Flynn's last words suggested a personal knowledge of abandonment, a story he hadn't shared. Perhaps that explained his immediate understanding of her plight, his unwillingness to leave her behind despite the inconvenience. And what of her feelings for him? In less than a week, this quiet, honorable man had become important to her in ways she hadn't thought possible. The prospect of him leaving for California created an ache in her chest that couldn't be dismissed as mere gratitude. But what future could there be for them? Flynn had made no declarations, shown no clear romantic interest beyond common courtesy and kindness. His life was nomadic, following work across the frontier. Hers, hopefully, would be establishing roots in Pecos, building the stable existence she'd always craved. These thoughts chased each other through Zara's mind as she prepared for bed. Despite her mental turmoil, physical exhaustion soon claimed her, and she fell into a deep sleep, dreaming of crossroads and choices. Morning brought renewed energy and determination. Zara dressed carefully in her blue dress, now somewhat wrinkled but still her best option, and arranged her hair in a simple but neat style. She wanted to make a good impression on Mrs. Spencer, to appear capable and reliable despite the unusual circumstances of her arrival in Pecos. Flynn knocked on her door at 9 o'clock, his expression as unreadable as ever, though his eyes seemed to approve of her appearance. "Mrs. Spencer will meet us at the general store at 10, he informed her. "Thought you might want breakfast first." They ate in the hotel dining room again, though Zara found her appetite diminished by nervous anticipation. Flynn, observant as always, noticed her pushing eggs around her plate. "Spencer's a good family," he reminded her gently. "You don't have to take the position if it doesn't feel right." Zara nodded, grateful for his understanding. "It's not that. I'm just, starting over is harder than I expected. Everything is new and uncertain." "You're stronger than you know," Flynn said, his voice low but firm. "Saw that at the crossroads. Most would have broken, but you were ready to face whatever came." The compliment, delivered with such simple conviction, bolstered Zara's confidence. "Thank you for seeing that in me. I'm not always sure I see it myself." The general store was bustling when they arrived a few minutes before 10. Flynn guided Zara to a quieter corner near the fabric section, explaining that Mrs. Spencer would likely be finishing her shopping before meeting them. They didn't have long to wait. A woman in her early 40s, dressed in a well-made but practical burgundy traveling suit, approached them with purpose. Her face, though lined with care and recent grief, remained handsome, her dark hair showing only touches of gray at the temples. "Mr. Ryder," she greeted Flynn, extending her hand. "A pleasure to see you again, though under unusual circumstances from what I understand." Flynn took her hand briefly. "Mrs. Spencer, appreciate you coming. This is Miss Zara Preston." Mrs. Spencer turned keen brown eyes to Zara, assessing but not unkind. "Miss Preston, my husband's foreman delivered your story along with Mr. Ryder's letter. Quite remarkable." "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Spencer," Zara said, attempting to mask her nervousness. "Mr. Ryder has spoken highly of your family." "Has he?" Mrs. Spencer's eyebrows rose slightly as she glanced at Flynn. "That's unusually verbose for our Mr. Ryder. He must think well of you." Flynn cleared his throat, looking uncharacteristically uncomfortable. "Miss Preston has experience keeping house and teaching children. Thought she might be what you're looking for." "Perhaps." Mrs. Spencer gestured to some chairs near the store's pot-bellied stove. "Let's sit and become better acquainted, shall we?" The next half-hour passed in what felt to Zara like an informal interview. Mrs. Spencer asked about her education, her household skills, her experience with children. Zara answered honestly, neither exaggerating her abilities nor diminishing them. "And your family?" Mrs. Spencer asked finally. Mr. Ryder's letter mentioned abandonment but few details. Zara hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "My father died 6 years ago. My mother remarried and my stepfather." She took a steadying breath. "They left me at Heartbreak Crossing 5 days ago with instructions to wait for a stage that wouldn't arrive for a week. Mr. Ryder found me and offered assistance." Mrs. Spencer's expression darkened. "Left you at that God-forsaken junction, with no water or shelter." "Yes, madam." "Barbarity," Mrs. Spencer declared, her refined accent slipping to reveal something harder beneath. "Absolute barbarity." She shook her head. "Well, Miss Preston, their loss may prove our gain. I do need household help, but more importantly, my children need education. Their previous governess left us rather abruptly, and I've been attempting to manage both the household and their schooling. It's proved challenging." Hope surged in Zara's chest. "I would be happy to teach them, Mrs. Spencer. My father valued education highly, and ensured I received more learning than most girls in our circumstances." Mrs. Spencer nodded approvingly. "I can offer room and board plus $15 monthly to start. If the arrangement proves satisfactory to both of us, we can discuss an increase." It was more than Zara had dared hope for. "That would be more than generous, Mrs. Spencer." "Good, then it's settled." Mrs. Spencer rose. "I'll complete my purchases and meet you at the hotel in an hour. We can return to the ranch together." After she left, Zara turned to Flynn, barely containing her excitement. $15 a month, and teaching the children. It's more than I hoped for." Flynn's expression softened into something close to a genuine smile. "Told you it would work out. Spencer family's lucky to have you." "I'm the fortunate one," Zara insisted. "And I owe it all to you, Flynn, if you hadn't stopped." "But I did," he interrupted gently. "No use dwelling on what didn't happen." They returned to the hotel so Zara could gather her few belongings and check out of her room. Flynn handled the bill despite her protests, reminding her that she would need what little money she had until receiving her first wages. As they waited in the lobby for Mrs. Spencer, Zara found herself reluctant to ask the question that had been haunting her since the previous evening. "Will you be leaving for California soon?" She finally managed, trying to keep her tone casual. Flynn looked surprised. "California? No, not right away," he hesitated. "Got a contract with Spencer for the summer, breaking a string of Mustangs he bought cheap from a rancher going bust further south." Relief flooded Zara, though she tried not to show it too plainly. "So you'll be at the ranch, nearby," Flynn confirmed. "Spencer has a line camp where I usually stay when working for him, about a mile from the main house." The knowledge that Flynn would be close, at least for the summer, lifted a weight from Zara's heart. She would have time to better understand her feelings for him, perhaps even discover if he felt anything beyond duty and kindness toward her. Mrs. Spencer arrived promptly as promised, driving a light wagon pulled by two well-matched bay horses. Flynn helped Zara up to the seat beside Mrs. Spencer, then mounted Samson to ride alongside them. As they left Pecos behind, heading toward the Spencer ranch, Zara felt a sense of rightness settle over her. The circumstances that brought her here had been painful, but perhaps they had also been necessary. Perhaps this was where she was meant to be all along. The Spencer ranch exceeded Zara's expectations. Nestled in a valley with a creek running through it, the property boasted a substantial main house, a large barn, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings. Fields of alfalfa, green despite the drought thanks to careful irrigation from the creek, stretched to the north, while cattle grazed on the hills to the east. The main house itself was impressive by frontier standards: 2 stories, painted white with green shutters, a broad porch wrapping around 3 sides. Flower beds, somewhat neglected but still blooming, lined the front walk. "It's beautiful," Zara breathed as they approached. "My husband built it to my specifications," Mrs. Spencer said, pride evident in her voice. "I insisted on bringing some civilization to the frontier." They were met in the yard by a tall man with sun-weathered skin and a neat salt and pepper beard. Joseph Spencer himself, Zara presumed. 4 children clustered behind him, curiosity evident on their faces. "Eleanor," Spencer greeted his wife warmly, helping her down from the wagon. "Successful trip to town, I see." "Indeed," Mrs. Spencer replied. "This is Miss Preston, who will be helping with the household and the children's education. You remember Mr. Ryder, of course." Spencer nodded to Flynn, then turned to Zara with an assessing but not unkind gaze. "Welcome to our home, Miss Preston. Flynn's letter mentioned unusual circumstances bringing you to Pecos." "Yes, sir," Zara confirmed. "I'm very grateful for the opportunity your wife has offered me." Spencer seemed satisfied with this response. "Any friend of Flynn's is welcome here. He's a man of excellent judgment." He turned to the children. "Come introduce yourselves to Miss Preston." The children stepped forward one by one. William, the eldest at 12, had his father's height and his mother's dark hair. Emma, 10, possessed a quiet dignity that reminded Zara of Mrs. Spencer. The younger 2, James, 7, and Lily, 4, showed more enthusiasm, bombarding Zara with questions until their mother gently hushed them. "You'll have plenty of time to get acquainted," Mrs. Spencer assured them. "Miss Preston will begin your lessons tomorrow." Flynn, who had dismounted during the introductions, caught Zara's eye. "I should get Samson settled and check on the horses I delivered," he said. "Make sure my partner got them here safely." "Of course," Spencer agreed. "The Mustangs arrived yesterday, by the way. 10 of them, mean as sin and wild as the wind. You'll have your work cut out for you." Flynn nodded, seeming pleased by this news. "I'll start assessing them tomorrow." He turned to Zara. "Miss Preston, good luck with your new position." The formality of his address, after days of being Zara to him, stung slightly. But Zara understood they were in company now, and propriety must be observed. "Thank you, Mr. Ryder," she replied, matching his tone, "for everything." Something flickered in his eyes, regret. Perhaps before he touched the brim of his hat and led Samson toward the barn. Mrs. Spencer showed Zara to her quarters, a pleasant room on the 2nd floor with windows overlooking the creek. It was simply furnished but comfortable, with a single bed, a dresser, a small writing desk, and a rocking chair near the window. "I hope this will suit you," Mrs. Spencer said. "The children's schoolroom is downstairs off the main parlor. You'll find books and supplies there." "It's lovely," Zara assured her. "Far more comfortable than I anticipated." "We believe in treating people well," Mrs. Spencer said firmly. "You're not a servant, Miss Preston. You're a member of our household responsible for specific duties." She hesitated. "I should mention, the children are still recovering from the loss of their sister. Anne was 16, the eldest. They may have difficult moments." "I understand," Zara said softly. "I lost my father when I was 13. Grief takes time." Mrs. Spencer's expression softened. "Yes, it does." "I think you'll do very well here, Miss Preston." Left alone to unpack her meager belongings, Zara found herself drawn to the window. From this vantage point, she could see the barn and corrals where several horses milled about. A familiar figure on a chestnut horse rode out from the barn, heading toward a smaller cabin visible in the distance the line camp Flynn had mentioned. Presumably, watching him go, Zara felt a complicated mix of emotions. Relief that he would be nearby, uncertainty about what that might mean for her newfound stability, and an undeniable longing to know him better. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity as Zara settled into her role at the Spencer Ranch. The children, initially wary, quickly warmed to her gentle teaching style. William, though approaching the age when boys often resist education, showed surprising aptitude for mathematics and geography. Emma revealed herself to be a voracious reader with a particular fondness for poetry. James struggled with reading but displayed natural talent for drawing, while little Lily was simply eager to be included in whatever her siblings were doing. Mrs. Spencer proved a fair employer, neither overly demanding nor neglectful in her oversight. Mr. Spencer, often busy with ranch operations, nevertheless made time to inquire about the children's progress and occasionally joined them for evening reading sessions. Flynn remained a peripheral presence. Zara caught glimpses of him in the distance, working with horses in the breaking corral or conferring with Spencer about ranch matters. Occasionally, he would take meals with the family when invited, but he spoke little and always returned to the line camp afterward. On the rare occasions when they interacted directly, Flynn was unfailingly polite, but maintained a distance that confused and hurt Zara. The easy companionship they had developed during their journey seemed to have evaporated, replaced by formal courtesy. 3 weeks after her arrival at the Spencer Ranch, Zara was reading on the porch after the children had gone to bed when she heard the sound of approaching hoofbeats. Looking up, she was surprised to see Flynn riding toward the house, unusual at this late hour. He dismounted at the bottom of the porch steps, removing his hat as he approached. The lamplight spilling from the parlor window illuminated his features, revealing a day's worth of stubble and tired eyes. "Evening, Miss Preston," he greeted her, his voice low. "Didn't expect anyone to be up." "I often read after the children are asleep," Zara explained, closing her book. "It's the quietest time." Flynn nodded, seeming uncertain whether to stay or continue into the house. "Spencer around, got news about the Mustangs he should hear." He and Mrs. Spencer rode to the Newcomb Ranch for dinner. "They won't return until late." "I see." Flynn shifted his weight, glancing toward his horse as if considering retreat. "You're welcome to wait," Zara offered, gesturing to the chair beside hers. "I could make coffee." Flynn hesitated, then nodded. Coffee would be welcome. Been a long day. Zara went inside to prepare the coffee, returning a few minutes later with 2 steaming mugs. Flynn had taken the offered chair, his hat resting on his knee, his posture suggesting both fatigue and tension. "How are the Mustangs progressing?" Zara asked, handing him a mug. "Better than expected," Flynn replied, taking a careful sip. 8 of the 10 are responding well to training. 2 might be too wild to break properly, but Spencer can sell them to the Army. They don't care about manners, just endurance. "That sounds like success," Zara observed, "yet you seem troubled." Flynn's eyes met hers briefly before returning to his coffee. "Not troubled, just He paused, seeming to search for words. Time to move on soon. The statement hit Zara with unexpected force. You're leaving. Mustangs will be ready in another 2 weeks. Spencer's paid for a month's work. Flynn shrugged. That's how it goes. Job ends, I move on. To California? Zara asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Maybe. Got an offer from a ranch near Sacramento. He stared into his coffee. Good money. Zara's hands tightened around her mug. That's very far. It is. Flynn was silent for a long moment. How are you finding your position here? Children seem to have taken to you. Zara recognized the change of subject but allowed it. They're wonderful children. Bright and eager to learn, even William, who pretends to be too grown for schooling. The Spencers have been very kind. Good. Flynn nodded. You deserve kindness. The simple statement, delivered with quiet sincerity, broke something in Zara's carefully maintained composure. Why have you been avoiding me? She asked, the question escaping before she could reconsider. Flynn looked startled. Haven't been avoiding you. You've barely spoken to me since we arrived, Zara persisted. After everything we shared on the journey here, I thought we were friends at least. Flynn set his coffee down, his expression troubled. We are, He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of agitation. Thought it best to keep my distance. You're establishing yourself here, don't need complications. Complications, Zara echoed. Is that what I am to you? A complication? That's not what I meant. Flynn's voice held a note of frustration. You have a chance for stability here, respect, a future. I'm just a drifter, Zara. No roots, no home, nothing to offer a woman like you. The admission hung in the air between them, revealing more than Flynn had perhaps intended. Zara's heart raced as she considered the implications. Perhaps you should let me decide what complications I'm willing to accept in my life, she said softly. Flynn's eyes met hers, something vulnerable and uncertain in their blue depths. What are you saying? Before Zara could respond, the sound of an approaching wagon announced the Spencers' return. The moment broken, Flynn stood abruptly, retrieving his hat. Should speak to Spencer about those Mustangs, he said, his mask of reserve sliding back into place. Good evening, Miss Preston. Watching him walk away to greet the returning Spencers, Zara felt both frustration and hope. Flynn's words suggested feelings beyond friendship, but his actions continued to maintain distance. The question was whether his sense of duty and propriety would prevent him from acknowledging those feelings before he left for California. The following Sunday afternoon found most of the ranch at rest. The Spencers had taken the children to visit neighbors after church services, leaving Zara with a rare day to herself. She decided to take advantage of the beautiful weather by walking along the creek, a book tucked under her arm for when she found a suitable spot to read. The creek gurgled pleasantly as it wound through the ranch property, lined with cottonwoods and willows that provided welcome shade. Zara followed it upstream, enjoying the solitude and the chance to gather her thoughts. She had nearly reached the property boundary when she spotted a familiar figure seated on a fallen log, staring into the water. Flynn hadn't seen her yet, and for a moment, Zara considered turning back to avoid another awkward encounter. But something in his solitary posture, a weariness, a loneliness she recognized too well, made her continue forward. Good afternoon, she called softly as she approached. Flynn looked up, surprise evident in his expression. Miss Preston, didn't expect to see anyone out here today. The Spencers took the children visiting, Zara explained, stopping a few feet from him. I thought a walk might be pleasant. Flynn nodded, shifting slightly as if to make room on the log beside him, then thinking better of it. Creek's nice this time of year, before the summer heat dries it too much. May I join you? Zara asked directly. After a moment's hesitation, Flynn nodded, moving over on the log. Zara settled beside him, smoothing her skirts and setting her book aside. For a while, they sat in silence, watching the water flow past. It wasn't the comfortable silence they had shared during their journey, but neither was it entirely uncomfortable. "I've been thinking about what you said," Zara finally ventured. "About being a drifter with nothing to offer." Flynn tensed beside her but didn't respond. "I think you're wrong," Zara continued, gathering her courage. "You offer honor and decency in a world that often lacks both. You offer kindness without expecting reward. You offer protection to those who need it most." She turned to face him fully. "Those are rare qualities, Flynn, more valuable than property or position." Flynn's eyes, when they met hers, held a mix of longing and resignation. "Kind of you to say. But a woman needs stability, Zara. A home, security, things I can't provide." "What makes you think I value those things above all else?" Zara challenged gently. "I had stability with my family, yet they abandoned me at the first sign of hardship." "Security is an illusion that can vanish in an instant." "What are you saying?" Flynn asked, echoing his question from their interrupted porch conversation. Zara took a deep breath. "I'm saying that in the short time I've known you, you've shown me more consideration and respect than most people in my entire life. I'm saying that, when I think of you leaving for California, I feel as though something precious is being torn away." She swallowed hard. "I'm saying that I care for you, Flynn Ryder, drifter or not." Flynn stared at her, seeming stunned by her declaration. For a terrible moment, Zara thought she had completely misread the situation, that the feelings were entirely one-sided. Then his hand, calloused but gentle, covered hers where it rested on the log between them. "Zara," he said, her name sounding like a prayer on his lips. "I'm not good with words, never have been. But from the moment I saw you standing alone at that crossroads, something in me changed." His fingers tightened slightly around hers. "The thought of leaving you behind hurts more than I can say, but I want what's best for you, and I'm not sure that's me." "Shouldn't that be my decision?" Zara asked softly. Flynn's expression softened, a vulnerability she'd rarely seen crossing his features. "You deserve better than a man who can't offer you a proper home." "What if home isn't a place?" Zara suggested. "What if it's a person? Someone who makes you feel safe and valued and seen?" The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Flynn's eyes searched hers, looking for any sign of doubt or hesitation. Finding none, he reached up slowly, his fingers just brushing her cheek in a touch so gentle it made her heart ache. "I never thought to find someone like you," he admitted, his voice low. "Someone who could see past the quiet, past the drifting. Someone who might want what little I have to give." "It's not little to me," Zara whispered. The kiss, when it came, was tentative at first, a gentle pressing of lips, a question asked and answered in the same breath. Then, as Zara responded, it deepened into something more certain, a promise exchanged without words. When they finally parted, Flynn's eyes held a clarity and purpose Zara hadn't seen before. "I can't offer what most men would," he said, still holding her hand. "But I can offer this. I won't ever leave you behind. Wherever I go, if you want to come with me, there will always be a place for you. And if you want to stay in one place, I'll find a way to make that work too." "That's all I ask," Zara replied, squeezing his hand. "Just a chance for us to discover what we might be together." Flynn smiled then, a full, genuine smile that transformed his face. "I think I can manage that." In the weeks that followed, Flynn's work with the Mustangs continued, but the nature of his visits to the main house changed dramatically. He began taking evening meals with the family regularly, often staying afterward to join in reading sessions or checkers games with the children. On Sundays, he accompanied Zara and the Spencers to church services in Pecos, sitting beside Zara with a quiet pride that did not go unnoticed by the congregation. Mrs. Spencer, observant as ever, required only one instance of seeing them together to understand the changed relationship. She pulled Zara aside after Sunday dinner the week following their conversation at the creek. "I see Mr. Ryder has found reason to be less solitary of late," she remarked, a knowing smile playing at her lips. Zara blushed but met her employer's gaze steadily. "Yes, madam. I hope that doesn't create difficulties with my position here." "Not at all," Mrs. Spencer assured her. "In fact, I find it rather poetic, the abandoned young woman and the lone horseman finding connection in such unlikely circumstances." Her expression grew more serious. "Flynn Ryder is a good man. One of the best Joseph and I have known in our years out here. If he has won your affections, I can only approve." "Thank you," Zara said, deeply relieved. "That means a great deal to me." As the deadline for completing the Mustang's training approached, Zara found herself increasingly anxious about what would come next. Flynn had declined the California offer, but had been vague about his future plans. Their moments together, though increasingly frequent, had been constrained by propriety and Zara's duties with the children. One evening, after the children were in bed, Flynn invited Zara for a walk beneath the stars. The night was warm and clear, the Milky Way a brilliant swath across the black velvet sky. "Beautiful," Zara commented as they strolled toward the creek, her hand tucked in the crook of Flynn's arm. "One thing I've always loved about being on the move," Flynn admitted. "Seeing the stars from different places. They're the same stars, but they look different somehow when the landscape changes." "I never thought of it that way," Zara said. "I've always seen stability in them, constants in a changing world." Flynn led her to a fallen log, the same one where they had shared their first kiss. Seating her carefully, he remained standing, an unusual nervousness evident in his posture. "Zara," he began, his voice holding an emotion she'd rarely heard from him. "I've been thinking about what happens after the Mustangs are trained." "As have I," she admitted. "You've never said what you plan to do next." Flynn took a deep breath. "I spoke with Spencer yesterday. He's offered me a permanent position, foreman of his horse operation. He wants to expand, breed better stock. Says he needs someone who understands horses the way I do." Zara's heart leapt with hope. "A permanent position here?" Flynn nodded, watching her face closely. "It would mean staying in one place, building something lasting." He paused. "There's a small piece of land at the edge of Spencer's property. Creek runs through it. Good spot for a house." The implications of his words made Zara's breath catch. "Flynn, are you saying—" "I'm saying I love you, Zara Preston," Flynn declared, the words clearly difficult for a man unaccustomed to expressing emotions. "Have since I don't know when. Maybe from the moment I saw you standing alone at that crossroads, refusing to be broken by what life had dealt you." He knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "I'm asking if you might consider building a life with me, not a wandering one but one with roots, here where you found purpose and respect." Tears filled Zara's eyes, blurring the beloved features before her. "Yes," she whispered, then more strongly, "Yes, Flynn. Nothing would make me happier." Flynn's smile in that moment was worth every hardship that had led her to this place, this man. He drew a small object from his pocket, a simple gold band with a tiny pearl set in its center. "Belonged to my mother," he explained as he slipped it onto her finger. "Only thing of value I've kept all these years. Seems right that it should be yours now." The ring fit perfectly, as if meant for her finger all along. Zara looked at it in wonder, then back to Flynn's face. "I love you," she said simply. "More than I thought possible when you found me at that crossroads." His kiss was tender but held the promise of a passion they had both carefully restrained until now. When they parted, both breathless, Flynn brushed a strand of hair from her face with gentle fingers. "When I said I'd take you anywhere," he murmured, "I never imagined you'd end up taking me home instead." The wedding took place 6 weeks later in the small church in Pecos. The entire Spencer family attended, Mrs. Spencer having helped Zara create a wedding dress from fine fabric ordered specially from San Antonio. Flynn, dressed in his first ever store-bought suit, stood tall and proud beside the pastor, his usual reserve melting into undisguised joy when Zara walked down the aisle toward him. They exchanged simple vows, speaking the traditional words with voices that held the weight of their unusual journey together. When Flynn placed a second ring, a wedding band to accompany the engagement pearl on Zara's finger, his hands trembled slightly, betraying the emotion he still found difficult to express in words. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the pastor declared to the gathered congregation. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." The celebration afterward at the Spencer Ranch was jubilant, with neighbors from miles around joining in the festivities. There was music and dancing, Flynn proving that his brief waltz with Zara during their journey had been only a hint of his hidden talents. "Where did you learn to dance like this?" Zara asked in delighted surprise, as he guided her confidently through a lively reel. Flynn's eyes twinkled with rare mischief. "Been practicing. Asked Mrs. Spencer to teach me when you were busy with the children. Wanted to surprise you." "You certainly succeeded," Zara laughed, heart full as she took in the man who was now her husband, still quiet, still reserved with others, but increasingly open with her in ways that felt like precious gifts. That night, they stayed in the small but comfortable cabin at the line camp, which Flynn had spent weeks renovating in preparation for their marriage. It would be their home until their own house could be built on the land Spencer had helped them purchase, a perfect spot where the creek widened into a natural pool, sheltered by cottonwoods, and with views of the distant mountains. In the privacy of their temporary home, Flynn's remaining reservations fell away entirely. Their union was both tender and passionate, the culmination of feelings that had grown steadily since that fateful meeting at Heartbreak Crossing. Afterward, lying in each other's arms beneath a quilt Martha Daniels had sent as a wedding gift, they spoke of the future, the house they would build, the life they would create together, the family they hoped for. "Did you ever imagine this?" Zara asked softly, her head resting on Flynn's chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. "When you saw me standing alone at that crossroads, did you ever think we'd end up here?" Flynn's fingers traced gentle patterns on her bare shoulder. "Never. Thought I'd take you to safety and be on my way, another good deed in passing." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "But somewhere between Heartbreak Crossing and Pecos, you worked your way into my heart so thoroughly I couldn't imagine riding away from you." "I'm glad you couldn't," Zara murmured sleepily. "I think I started falling in love with you the moment you offered me water in the desert." Flynn's soft chuckle rumbled beneath her ear. "And I thought I was just being decent." "You were," Zara confirmed. "That's exactly why I fell in love with you." 2 years later, on a bright spring morning, Flynn Ryder stood on the porch of the house he had built with his own hands, watching his wife in the garden below. Zara knelt among the vegetable rows, her auburn hair escaping its pins to curl around her face in the morning breeze. Beside her, a dark-haired toddler enthusiastically helped by patting dirt with small, chubby hands. "Thomas, gently," Zara instructed with a laugh as the boy's enthusiasm threatened to uproot a newly planted tomato seedling. "Like Mama showed you." Flynn's chest tightened with a now familiar mixture of love and disbelief at his good fortune. Their son, born a year after their marriage and named for Zara's father, had his mother's thoughtful expression and his father's determined nature. At 18 months, he was already showing signs of Flynn's affinity for animals, fearlessly approaching the gentler horses under his father's watchful eye. So much had changed in the 2 years since their wedding. Flynn had thrived in his role as Spencer's horse manager, his reputation for turning wild Mustangs into reliable mounts spreading throughout the territory. Zara had continued teaching the Spencer children while also establishing a small school in their home 2 afternoons a week for ranch children from neighboring properties. Their house, modest but solid, stood as testament to Flynn's previously untapped skills as a builder. 2 bedrooms, a comfortable main room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen with actual glass windows that Zara had insisted upon it was more than Flynn had ever called his own, and sometimes he still woke in the night needing to reassure himself that it was real. "Papa." Thomas spotted him and waved enthusiastically, dirt smudging his round cheeks. "Help coming, partner," Flynn called back, descending the porch steps to join his family in the garden. Zara looked up with a smile that still had the power to stop his breath. "I thought you were riding to the north pasture this morning." "Heading out soon," Flynn confirmed, crouching beside them. "Wanted to see my favorite people first." He reached out to ruffle Thomas's dark hair, then leaned in to kiss Zara gently. She returned the kiss, her free hand coming up to rest against his cheek. "I have news," she said when they parted, her eyes shining with something that made Flynn's heart skip. "Good news, I hope?" he asked, though her expression already answered the question. Zara nodded, taking his hand and pressing it to her stomach. "We'll need to prepare the 2nd bedroom sooner than we thought. Dr. Miller confirmed it yesterday when I was in town. By winter, Thomas will have a little brother or sister." Joy surged through Flynn, so powerful it momentarily robbed him of words. He gathered Zara carefully into his arms, mindful of Thomas, who promptly climbed onto both their laps, unwilling to be left out of the embrace. "Happy?" Zara asked softly against his ear, though she clearly knew the answer. "Beyond words," Flynn replied, his voice rough with emotion. He pulled back slightly to look into her eyes. "I never thought I'd have any of this: a home, a family, you. Sometimes I still can't believe it's real." "Believe it," Zara said firmly. "It's as real as that crossroads where you found me. As real as your promise to take me anywhere." "Best promise I ever made," Flynn murmured, pressing his forehead to hers. Thomas, tired of being ignored, patted both their faces with dirt-covered hands, leaving smudges and eliciting laughter from both parents. "I should go," Flynn said reluctantly, rising and bringing Zara up with him. "Spencer's expecting me to check those new mares before noon." Zara nodded, understanding as always. "We'll be here when you return. I'm making your favorite stew for supper." Flynn kissed her once more, then swung Thomas high in the air, causing the boy to shriek with delight before settling him back on the ground. "Be good for Mama," he instructed, receiving a solemn nod in return. As he saddled his horse a few minutes later, not Samson, who enjoyed a well-earned retirement in the pasture behind their house, but a younger gelding from one of Flynn's training programs, he found himself reflecting on the twisting path that had led him to this life. He had been a drifter, a man who valued his solitude and independence above all else. Then a chance encounter at a dusty crossroads had changed everything. In saving Zara, he had ultimately saved himself from a life of disconnection and loneliness. In offering to take her anywhere, he had found his way home. Flynn mounted his horse and turned toward the north pasture, knowing that when the day's work was done, he would return to the warmth and love of the family he had never expected to have. The journey from Heartbreak Crossing had been long and sometimes difficult, but it had led to a destination beyond his wildest dreams. That evening, as dusk painted the sky in shades of purple and gold, Flynn returned to find Zara and Thomas on the porch, waiting for him as they did each day. Thomas ran to meet him, arms outstretched to be lifted onto the horse, a ritual Flynn never tired of. Zara watched from the porch, one hand resting protectively over her stomach where their second child grew. As Flynn approached with Thomas proudly perched before him on the saddle, he met Zara's eyes and saw in them everything he had ever needed, but never known how to ask for: acceptance, understanding, and a love that had transformed two broken, abandoned souls into a family. "Welcome home," Zara called, the simple greeting holding all the meaning in the world. Flynn Ryder, once a man of few words and fewer attachments, smiled at the woman who had taught him the true meaning of home. "Nowhere else I'd rather be," he replied, and meant it with all his heart.